All right. Hey, hi, everybody. It's Andy Moore. I am sitting here in my office, and it is the Friday before Election Day. And if you're like me, you're probably kind of hanging out, wondering uh, what we should do before next week. So I was looking at the state election board website, and which I'll pull up right now. There we go. Ooh, fancy. And that's actually my data, my my spreadsheet. Hang on. And this is the state election board website, and they had just released the latest voter registration data. And since it's 3 o'clock on Friday, I was poking around on the data and dumped it into my big data spreadsheet. So what we see overall is a net gain of a couple 100,000 voters this year. Let me look. So as some of you know, I keep a lot of data. This is fascinating to me. So let me break it down for you. This is right here in this column. This is our current data as of November 1st. So as of today, I've been tracking this going back since 1990, right? So I've got 30 some odd years, 34 years of voter data from the state election board. I believe these numbers are all from November 1st of every year. That way we get kind of a easy point of comparison. Obviously, registration data is going to be most prominent right before the election. I have every year because they release these data points for every year, um, including odd number years like 2023 and 2021. On this front page, I just compared on election years because that's the numbers we're usually most concerned about. And so, looking at compared to 2022, you can see that this year is quite a bit higher. Here, I'll zoom in case you're watching on your phone. So Democrats come in at 659,000, Republicans at 1.28 million Republicans, 481,000 independents, substantial gain there. 23,000 libertarians hanging strong for a grand total of 2.4 million Oklahomans currently registered to vote. Compared to, let's look back at 2020, right? So since the last presidential election, there's been a lot of purges that have happened, and a lot of voters removed because they moved or because they died or there's duplicates or they just didn't vote in the last several presidential elections or in statewide elections too. So over the last 4 years, we see a net gain, a net increase of about 183,000 voters since 2020, uh, which is not insignificant at all. The average margin of victory for a gubernatorial election is only about 142,000 votes. So this is a big change. I think it's the top line things of interest, right, is that Democrats have lost uh, 91, almost 92,000 voters since 2020. That's a big shift. Republicans have gained gobs, right? The GOP has gained gobs, 148,000 more since 2020. But proportionally, like the increase for independents is just substantial, right? In 2020, only 363 up to 481. I would imagine, just anecdotally from our conversations in the community, knocking doors, doing community events, voter reg drives, that some of this change, right? That a substantial number of Democrats have left the party and switched to either independent or honestly to Republican. I know a lot of Republicans have also switched and gone to independent. I don't know hardly anything about these 8,000 libertarians. I'm sorry. I know a few libertarians, but I don't know 8,000 of them. But I do see a lot of people leaving the two major parties and switching to be unaffiliated or independent voters. And there's a lot of folks, especially in rural areas. I had this conversation a lot this past week. People are changing their registration from Democrat to Republican because they live in an area where they almost only have Republican races and they want to be able to vote in the primary. So we're forcing people to choose party affiliation based on what elections are available. We can talk about the need for nonpartisan or for unified primaries another time. You guys are probably tired of hearing me talk about that, but interesting. This is the most registered voters Oklahoma has ever had. Of course, this is the most people we've ever had in our state as well, but that's a really strong, really big number right there. 2.4 million registered voters as of today. We don't know what turnout is yet. I will be plugging this in just a few days to kind of find out what our turnout rate looks like. If you're interested, though, looking back at past presidential elections, you can see in 2020, our turnout rate was around 70%, a little bit less than that in 2016, a little bit less than that in 2012. 2008, of course, was a pretty high turnout rate. That was when Obama ran for the first time. There was a lot of hope and change, excitement. Turnout across the country was high that year, less so for his reelection. 2016, of course, an open seat, lots of interest there. We usually see more interest in those years. But 2020, despite the fact that we are in the midst of a pandemic, really high turnout across the country. For Oklahoma, this is pretty high. The midterm elections or the, we'll say, off year, like in 2022, where turnout was just over 50%, which is pretty abysmal. But not as bad as 2014, which was even worse. That was Governor Fallon's reelection in 2014. Voters were not enthused at all, barely, not even 41%. So you can see in those midterm elections, we're usually around 40 to 50%, something like that. And then in the presidential elections, we're up greater than around 60% or even higher. Some years, like in 2000, pretty low, which is crazy because that was the year of the dangling Chads down in Florida. It was a really consequential election. It's amazing to me that turnout was so low here, unusually low. So if we do a quick average here, right? So the average turnout in a presidential election is somewhere around 66%. So that's not terrible. If we were to guess and we say 66% times 2.4 million, we might be looking at a turnout around 1.6 million this year. Wow, that would be a lot. Surely that's not right. Did I do that right? Maybe I did. That's crazy. That would be just a massive turnout, I think, and really makes us wonder what the outcome will be, right? A couple of things to also remember is that when we are talking about turnout and what we might see on election day, obviously there are two major candidates on the ballot, as well as some third party or independent candidates for president. Registration numbers and votes cast don't match up, right? They don't necessarily match up. I expect that President or Vice President Harris will likely receive more than roughly 27%, which is what the Democrats are in our electorate, right? As you can see here, there's about 27% of Oklahomans that are registered as Democrats, about 20% registered as independents, and 52% registered as Republicans. I don't know what it's going to look like in Oklahoma. This is a wild year in terms of politics in all kinds of ways. Looking back at 2020, President Biden won Oklahoma County by just a hair, like 5,000 votes. Given the trends over the last 4 years, I would not be surprised if Biden wins Oklahoma County and has at least one county go blue. Or excuse me, if Vice President Harris wins Oklahoma County and at least one county goes blue, that may be it. I don't know. I know that almost every county, if not every county, has gone for the Republican candidate for the last several presidential elections. I'm going to go back and look and see when the last time it was that a Democrat won any county in Oklahoma for president. I would expect, based on typical statewide elections, looking back at governor's races, other statewide officials, I would expect that Harris might pull in, somewhere between 30 and 40%, maybe 35, maybe 38, maybe 42. I'm not good at this kind of forecast, or at least I haven't dug into the data yet. That will probably be how I spend my weekend, though, hanging out with my friends and family and looking at spreadsheets. In terms of total registration, like I said, this is the highest ever. I even made a chart to show you. So this year we're up at 2.44 million, which is by far the highest ever. I really was hoping we would hit 2.5 million. It's not going to be that high, but I was really hoping it would be. But you can see we've been kind of bumping along at a pretty steady state for a long time. And then since 2020, I mean, since 2018, maybe, it's been nudging upwards year after year after year. I'm really curious why. I'll say Let's Fix This started in 2016 and it's been going up since then. Friends, I don't know if you're part of this, but I hope you are. Maybe we're slowly driving some excitement, some interest in the base. Wouldn't that be great? Wouldn't that be great? This also is an important thing to remember, that in terms of the governor's press release back in September about the number of voters that had been purged from our state. Again, his press release was a little misleading in how it was phrased. Uh, Voter list maintenance is something good and normal that every state does. Every state is required to do on a monthly basis all the time. You've got to remove people who are deceased, who have moved out of state, duplicate entries, anything like that. Like, you got to keep it up, just like you want to keep up your Christmas list, right? Which, as a reminder, it's November 1st. If you're sending out holiday cards, this is a good weekend to take some time to update your card list, your mailing list. Make sure you've got the right addresses for people, reflecting marriages, divorces, children, deaths, all that stuff. Same thing when it comes to voter lists. And so we are, it's interesting, I think, to see that we still have a net gain over what we had last year and the year before and the year before that. And that means that despite the fact that, yes, in the last 4 years, 453,000 people have been removed for various reasons. Some of those have come back and re-registered, undoubtedly. There's also new people moving to our state all the time. There are more young people growing up and becoming voting age. In fact, there's a new report out earlier today, I think, or just recently, from Tufts University. They are the home of this project called Circle. It's a long name. Here, I'll share it. It's the Center for Information and Research on Civic Learning and Engagement. Oh, hang on. Hoping my computer doesn't crash on me here. It's really straining under the burden of all this data. Okay. Anyway, this report shows that. Oh, come on now. Okay. There we go. Hang on. Let me show you. There we go. Okay, that's not it either. Goodness gracious, live streaming. What a pain. There we go. View tab. I'll move it around. Hang with me. There we go. Let me share that tab. You're probably not as interested in this as I am, but thank you for hanging with me. 1 week away. It is a report from just 2 days ago from Circle that at the stage, there it is. 1 week away from Election Day. Most states are behind on youth registration, but not Oklahoma. This is what I wanted to show you. On this map right here, Oklahoma, 4.6% positive change of young voters. And that's ages 18 to 29, which I know is a large range. And those of you who are 28 or 29 are really appreciative that I call you young. But that makes sense in terms of like what turnout looks like. That's an important segment. One of our target audiences is younger voters. We say 18 to 34, an even bigger range. But look at this. I mean, on the map, you see some states like Iowa, South Dakota that have massive decreases in the number of young voters who are registered. I don't know what's happening up north, but that's terrifying. But then you see states like Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, Colorado, Nevada, Tennessee, North Carolina, like having a positive increase. Michigan, look at that. Positive increase as opposed to a negative increase. That doesn't make sense. Notable increase in the number of young voters who are registered. We'll be curious to see if that translates on election night to a higher turnout among young voters. A few things to remember about election night. In Oklahoma, because of how we administer our elections, we have the same voting machine in every precinct in the whole state. Every precinct uses paper ballots, optical scan machines. Nothing's connected to the internet. It gets tabulated locally. Those numbers are sent back to the state election board and put into a spreadsheet and aggregated. And those unofficial results are what populates on the state election board website, which I'll be monitoring all evening, like many of you. We will expect in Oklahoma to have to know the result of our elections in this state on election night. Results will start coming in around 7:30, right? They will report early voting and absentee voting numbers first in that first dump, and then it'll be trickling in as precincts continue to report over the next few hours. Usually, for an election like this, we expect to have a final unofficial result around, I don't know, 10 o'clock, maybe, give or take 30 minutes, um, unless it's really close. But I think for most races, we'll have some clarity on that for Oklahoma. Now, that is not the case in most states. Many other states have much more diverse elections infrastructure. They have different machines even within the same state. Like some counties use one machine, some counties use others. There's a lot of processes that are more difficult. And some states are just larger, right? California has like 40 million people. That is 10 times our state. It's a lot harder to tabulate, to get everyone to vote, to tabulate, and get all that data back in for a bigger state, as one would imagine. Also, just think about the times that polls close in different states. Not every state closes at the same time. And even if they all closed at 7 p.m., there's different time zones. So there's like a trickling in of data over the evening. This is nothing that you don't already know. You've all watched a presidential election in the past, but I'm saying this to remind you so you can remind your friends that we will there's a good chance that we might not know the outcome of the election, of the presidential election on election night. And that's okay. It does not mean anything's wrong, anything bad has happened. It just means that we in this world have an unreasonable expectation of instantaneous information and data. And in Oklahoma, maybe we're used to it because of our local elections, but when we're playing in the big leagues with the rest of the country, there's a lot of different ways, right? Some states allow like military and overseas ballots. The deadline for those is not for several more days after the election. And so they necessarily need to wait for our soldiers and their families to vote. Like that makes sense. That is all done. Elections are all administered at a state level. Every state does it their own way. And so just take a deep breath, be patient, and accept that we will know when we know. And along the way, we should be wise to monitor our our news consumption. Don't be like me. Don't check 538 or the Silver Bulletin like every 3 hours to see if the models have changed. They haven't. They haven't. I know they haven't. I keep checking. That's not healthy. Don't do that. Right? Just relax. For the 200-ish thousand of you who have already voted early this year, incredible. Well done. Great job. Give yourself a hand. Save your sticker so you can wear it again on Tuesday. You don't want to be, missing out on that. If you voted by mail, congratulations to you as well. I don't know how many mail votes have been received yet, but good job for getting it out of the way. Ava, our intern, is headed to the polls right now to go vote with her friends. They were going to make a little party out of it and go together. I think that's great. Good job with early voting. I'm choosing to vote on election day this year. I requested an absentee ballot, mostly so I can make a video for some of you, and I'll be going to my local polling place on Tuesday. Hopefully with my wife, maybe with our daughter, we'll make a little family outing like we often try to do. And then I'm going to come back here and stick my head in a spreadsheet and try to see what I can learn to share with you on election night. Speaking of which, on election night, I'll be on Oklahoma City's Fox 25 from roughly 6:30 to 10:30. So if you don't have a television home that you like to watch, if you want to see what Steve Karnacki or Chuck Todd used to be like if they were just a local dweeb who cared about elections. Tune in to Fox 25. I'm getting ready to send out an email blast with all the information about that for those of you who want to watch. Great, tune in. Also, you don't have to, right? You can sit home. You can play Scrabble, read a book, you can play with your kids, do whatever you want. I think there's a new Fortnite update out today. If that's your jam, whatever it takes. As long as you cast your ballot, that's really all you can do, right? Cast your ballot, remind your friends, your neighbors, your family, encourage them to go vote as well. That's what you can do, and you don't have to do a darn thing else. Okay, well, on that note, big data, big registration data. In case you joined us late, a really quick recap, and then I'll shut this down. But the takeaway is new data out from the county or the state election board today with voter registration totals, and there it is. 2.442212. No, that's a weird way to say that. 2,442,211 registered voters in the state of Oklahoma. New record high here in Oklahoma. That translates to a net increase of about 183,000 more voters this year than in the last presidential election in 2020, which ain't much to, it's, something to sneeze at. That's a big change. How will that change the outcome? We'll see. Who knows? It might not, but it might. I think, it'll take us a few days after the election, maybe a few weeks to get the data back to really analyze what happened, where turnout was higher, where it was lower, and in particular, what the electorate looked like. I'm sure there's some groups doing exit polls. I don't know who they are. If you know someone who's doing exit polls, let me know. I'd love to find out and get some kind of inside intel to help me understand exactly what's happening with our elections in Oklahoma. All right. Thank you for voting. Have a good night. Enjoy your weekend.